Welcome to this week's Foresting Tomorrow podcast. And today we have two guests. First of all, Louise, Frederikke, Kofoed-Dam.
It's a very long name.
Yeah, and it's Danish.
It's very Danish.
Yeah, Head of Communications and B2B Marketing.
Exactly.
It's what the email signature says.
That is also primarily what I do.
Super.
Yeah.
And then Kristoffer Sparre.
Yeah.
What's that in English? Is that like spare?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But, it's more Swedish than Danish.
Okay. Head of Business and Nature Development, Northern Europe.
Yeah.
That's from your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super. Okay, so we're really happy that you'll spend an hour with us, talk about your company and all the interesting things that you do. And normally you're located in Copenhagen, right? Yeah.
Yes.
What brings you to this part of Denmark?
To the northern Jutland.
Yeah. And by the way, of course you're also from you're headquartered also in France. Do you know the slogan of Aalborg?
No.
It's the Paris of
Northern Paris.
Yeah.
That's true.
I haven't seen why yet.
I don't know either.
Okay.
So, but
I don't know what the is there a specific similarity?
I have no idea.
There's no Eiffel Tower or anything.
We have the Aalborg Tower.
Maybe you have one canal or something like that.
Oh, Kristoffer, can you? Yeah, super. Okay, so what takes you to the northern part of Denmark?
Well, it's actually a funny story. We've been collecting a few little things that we had to do in northern Jutland. We have a forestry project not too far away from here, about half an hour's drive.
Yeah.
And we met with one of our larger Danish clients to show them the forestry project that we're doing and that they're contributing to.
Yeah.
So now whenever we do move out of our offices in Copenhagen, which is actually quite often, we mostly try to do a few steps or a few things at once.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so EcoTree, could you maybe share some info on what that actually is?
Yeah, it's a different way or different approach to forestry. I like to say that we have found a way to democratize forest or make forest a micro investment so that everyone can contribute in their own way with one tree or thousands of trees or different kinds of projects. So a little bit like the Danish Andel thought, where we share the responsibility of building something greater.
Yeah. Awesome. And where did it start? Who's the founding?
The idea actually came about inspired by the Danish bottle recycling system. The four founders of the company EcoTree, they used to have a grandmother who was from Kerteminde, and they met in their summer house there, and they discovered that there is this amazing recycling system where people get a small financial incentive in order to bring back the plastic bottles.
Yeah.
And so they tried to come up with a way or a model where that financial incentive was then put onto forestry and the way that everybody could kind of contribute to forests, but then also get a profit from the sale of the timber in many, many years.
Okay. So the latter part of it, how does that work?
The profit from the sale of the timber. So the forest that we plant, obviously in Denmark, we plant on agricultural land. So whenever we do plant trees and forests, then the trees will be cut selectively over the next 100 years, but selectively, not clear cutting. That's quite important that we underline that it's not clear cutting, but selectively cutting. And then the sale from the timber, then the profit from that sale will then go back to the client that purchased the tree, so that invested in the tree.
Yeah.
So the kids or the grandkids will benefit.
But
there is a return of investment.
That's how it is with forestry.
It takes a long time.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So of course, now we're in Denmark. You're just told that you have a project in Denmark. Where else located in terms of projects?
Well, in Denmark we have 5 different projects. I would say almost all over. We're still missing Fyn to be covered, but 2 in Jutland, 3 in Sjælland, and so That's basically our projects here. And then we have some Germany, 5 projects in Germany, 2 projects in the UK, and 60 plus projects in France.
Okay.
And I've some projects on the way in the Netherlands, Benelux region. And besides that, of course, we also do a lot of biodiversity projects. So that's 200 plus projects.
Okay. So how does biodiversity projects distinguish from, let's say, the forestry projects?
Yeah. Well, we make them aligned together. We say that what we do is long-term. And so we guarantee, make sure that the forests are protected for a minimum of 100 years, which is rare compared to a lot of other companies that we are up against that plants maybe in the global south.
Yeah.
And besides that, we do ecosystem restoration. We don't just do tree planting, or we don't just do biodiversity. We actually make sure that there's room for all. So we actually compromise sometimes with the amount of wood or the amount of carbon a project can kind of contain to make room for biodiversity projects. Yeah. And then we get that financed as well by clients.
Okay. So could you try to categorize, let's say, a normal project? What's the component of it?
Yeah. Well, just from the get-go, let's just say it's 10 hectares or 100,000 square meters. What we'll do is that we'll with our forest partners or with our forest team, we have about 9 people in the forest team, landscape architects, carbon modeling, biodiversity experts, etc. So what they do is that they build a forest model on how could it look, how should it be, with room for animals, wildlife. If there's a river, okay, let's make sure there's a river. If it's not bent, it's called remandering waterways, for example, so it has more bends. Yeah. It could be that we, for example, in one of our projects, we measured the amount of insects and animals in the area with a sensor. Yeah. There was no animals or insects in the area because it was a heavy pesticide agricultural land. But it gave us the baseline, and then we, of course, had to help the area a little bit with supporting wild bees, supporting bird life, all the other things in the area.
Interesting. Sorry, I was just playing around with the mixer because it seems like your mic is. I'll just turn it a bit down.
Is it loud?
It's interfering.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry. Good. So 10 years. And do you have projects, going all the way back to 10 years? Or when was
the first project was 10 years ago. It was 1 hectare with a few trees, and let's try and see if people want to buy a tree and be part of like a movement like that. And then that hectare became 2 hectares, and those 2 hectares became 10 hectares, and those 10 hectares became 100 hectares. And it just started rolling. We grew on average until last year. We grew on average of almost 100% a year. So we almost doubled in size, both on the territory and the amount of revenue we did every year for 9 years straight almost.
Okay.
Is it mostly individual people buying trees, or is it companies? Or
well, we have two, like the companies, as I remember, and Louise might correct me, but as I remember, 80 or 85% of our revenue comes from the companies we work with. So we work with about 2,000 companies across Europe, and but we still have 100,000 individuals that plant trees with us.
100,000.
Yeah. Across 5 countries, and it could be. Your grandma wants to give 1 tree, an oak tree that will stand 100 years for the kid just born, or it could be the company. We work with some pension funds that are tired of having the reception full of flowers, so they changed it and planting trees in their own kind of selected area of a forest, so they're co-partners in a forest. So they give trees, we try to find ways to help companies, individuals to kind of have the best way possible to support nature. Yeah.
What's the smallest contribution that you can make?
The smallest contribution, you could do a biodiversity donation, which is very low, but it's not a normal thing people do. So I would say that the minimum that people normally use, well, for B2C, it's including VAT, so that's 18 euros or 140 kroner.
Yeah. And that gives you 1 oak tree,
for example, for 90 to 190 years, depending on. You can also choose which one you want, depending on what age you want to have.
What's the return of investment on that, Benjamin? You must know.
That's the thing about forestry. You calculate investments, 120 years into the future. Yeah. No one really does that anywhere.
We do. Yeah. We do. But we actually don't look at, because if you just look at the last few years, and if you do like an average for the last 5 years, you would have like, okay, this is going to be a booming business, great with price, but we actually go back 100 years and look at the average from 100 years ago until now, and that's what we're basing the next 100 years on. So it gives you way more conservative. So that's more or less a 2% return on investment per year.
Yeah.
That is basically we also in the forestry calculate like that.
Yeah.
Because when we plant a new area, you sort of have to know if it's a good species. You can calculate the investment depending on what species. So we also calculate like that.
Yeah.
But it's difficult.
It is, especially with the tree prices at the moment.
Yeah.
So
That's the thing. You have to price them to make the calculation, and it changes all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So 10 years. Do you have like a? I think I've read somewhere about a baseline, and do you have like some stats and maybe something that you could share on, how the projects have evolved?
Yeah, I think
maybe the first project was in France. I don't think we have that much fact with us today about that project specifically.
No, but I think I went to visit one of our French projects called Pizarche, which is an old forest that we acquired that was already planted, and it has trees that are 40, 60 years old. So it looks a lot more impressive as well than visiting an agricultural area that has just been planted with the small trees, where there is wetland areas. And the other Louise in the company, because we are two, she is our biodiversity expert, and she's based in France. And she goes and measures and does inventories of different species, both plants and wildlife. And then progressively, obviously, we collect all the data, and then we see, okay, what is the performance of these inventories? What are the results? And are we seeing any positive impacts on the actions that we're taking? Because I think what for us is really important is because we work with a lot of companies that use their investment as part of their reporting. They need the data in order to showcase that they're actually having a positive impact with their investment. And so we obviously need to provide that for them. So she goes out and she measures, or she counts how many frogs and toads there are in the wetland area,
birds and bats,
how many ordinates there are, and how many birds and bats there are. Checks any nesting boxes that we put up. Are they actually inhabited? Are they infested by it's like a specific wasp that sometimes goes and stays in the nesting area, so then the bats won't use it. And I think so that data that she then collects, and then she does a yearly reporting on each project to show how the progress is.
Could you maybe share some info about how the report looks like? Is it all the way down to counts of species, or is it more like aggregated into a number? Or
I think the internal reporting and like the full-on reporting is very, very detailed. But the actual report that we then provide to the client is not necessarily all the nitty-gritty numbers. That doesn't mean that they can't have access to it if they wish to. But it's from a communication perspective, and being in charge of communication, it's not very easy to communicate those kind of statistics.
That was why I was asking.
And also because there's not a framework per se in Europe to kind of report into it. So we are waiting a lot for different regulations, and especially the CSRD and the reporting of the larger companies that we work with, because they're like, oh, well, you're going to feed us with the KPIs if we invest in a biodiversity. Yes, we will. But what information do you need? So we are actually, we're really, really, really following it really closely on what kind of KPIs, what kind of data are they going to have to report on, so we can feed that data into their reporting to make it very easy. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you do anything inside your company to actually sort of engage in that process? Do you have people in committees or? Actually, until recently, we had one that was part of the EU committee of biodiversity credits, the measurement credits. Well, she changed job recently, so I'm not sure who's following it now. Maybe it's the other Louise that will follow it potentially forward. But it's we do have people, and we will have people all the way through those processes.
But we're also a member of the 1 trillion tree program.
Yeah.
Within the EU, where I think once a year, somebody goes to Brussels to talk with all the other companies and organizations that are part of that program.
Yeah, because it would make sense for a company to to really follow that closely because it has a huge impact, on the ups and downs. Okay, super. So biggest challenges. What has these been the last couple of years, or maybe throughout the project? Communication. It's always communication, right?
Well, communicating in 5 languages is quite a challenge when it comes to forestry. I would say that the biggest challenges for us, at least recently, have been the acquisition of land has been quite tough.
All over and just in Denmark?
All over.
Okay.
The process for each country is different. I'm not going to bore you with all the processes. But for example, in Denmark, there's this new Green Deal thing where you get extra money for planting a forest.
Yeah.
Means prices on land is going up like crazy.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. We can, a part of business model, we can just change it a little bit and make sense of it. But it still makes it harder and harder. In France, it's more that you bid on a piece of land. So you're not guaranteed, even though you're a highest payer, you're not guaranteed to get that piece of land because it's under the agricultural something. In Germany, it is still, we can own some land, but we cannot own all land because we're not a real financial entity in Germany, but more like a daughter company.
Yeah.
So there's all these weird rules all the way through. So land sourcing, I would say, is our biggest challenge at the moment.
It used to be the fact that we didn't have a farmer status
in
the beginning.
Bureaucracy is huge.
But then we acquired the Tisted forest, or the land, and got farmer status, which made the process a lot easier.
Yeah.
We skipped a few steps after 1.5 years of waiting for permission to plant something.
Yeah. But the process of applying to be allowed to plant on agricultural land is still, there's a short window in September every year, and if you miss that, then you have to postpone your planting plan by 1 year.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, could be okay. It's just 12 months, but in terms of economically, the commissions, and then if we want to grow the forest cover of Denmark, then we kind of have to start planting a few trees.
And maybe also in fall, spring and fall.
Yeah.
But also, that application process just makes it very, very slow and unagile. And we are unlike any other forest company. So most companies you would hear about in most of the world would be donation-based, where we are for profit. So they're standing with the hand out and they're gathering a pot of money. And for that pot of money, they will go down and they'll make something happen. Yeah. We reverse that. So we take the chance. We buy the land before anything. We plant the trees before we even sold the first one. Yeah. So we kind of start the process all over. So if you have to wait another year, it's a strain on finances, which makes everything slower. Yeah, it makes sense.
Also, acquiring land, in Denmark, the state also teased like sort of a grant for planting forest. So everyone stopped. They didn't know how big this grant would be, so nobody wanted to
No, but just we planted the first project here in Denmark 3 years ago. The first project we did at that time, there wasn't enough oak trees, so we got oak trees from Georgia. Okay, that's just every year there's a new issue with something.
So you, as a company, of course, you have your like your employees with the skill set and your competence and everything. And when we talk about planting forest, how do you do that? Because it's not something that you do internally, right?
It depends on the market or the country. Yeah. In France, we have a forestry team that each forester is in charge of their specific area in France. Okay. And they're in charge of not just creating the planting plan, but they're also in charge of, they don't do the entire planting themselves. They do hire extra foresters. Yeah. Otherwise, it would take forever. Yeah. Especially because we have, I think, is it 1,500 hectares in France?
Yeah, like that.
So it would take a lot of time if you have to plant that, just 5 people. But in Denmark, we work with Skovedjægerne. So even though it's a forestry team that actually does the planning and chooses the type of species and looks at the soil samples and works together very closely with Skoldyrkerne. Skoldyrkerne are the ones planting the trees for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are they also those that manage the forest afterwards, or they're still in the loop, or how do you do that?
Still, yes. So it's a co-joint. So they actually maintain the forest for the first few years by cleaning it and everything, removing weeds and everything, fencing, checking it, and it's simply because there's a critical mass of forest you would need before you hire a forester full time.
Yeah.
You're not going to hire, like, if you have 100 hectares in Denmark, there's not enough work for him to do or her to do, so it would be a waste of time. So instead we have outsourced it, and at the same time we have our foresters from France that from time to time, once, twice a year, come in and come by and check and do checklists or biodiversity checkups or counting of bats or whatever it could be.
Yeah. Cool. So how about now, of course, EUDR, I don't know, is that something that sort of interfere with the work that you do? But of course, you talked about how you monitor regulations all the time. But EUDR, or is there any sort of regulations that you see as really important for you in the coming years?
Yeah, I am expecting a lot from the CSRD.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if most people know it or should know it, but basically all the big companies in Europe need to report on their climate impact.
Yeah.
And let's see if the timeline holds up. But by 2028, the CSRD will be set into effect, where you will have a standard for have to balancing your impact on nature or biodiversity, and then you have to mitigate or compensate the damage that you do in Europe.
Yeah.
So you would actually have the big companies paying directly into getting more nature, getting more forest. For example, in Denmark, where we are missing maybe a one piece in the Green Deal, to make farmers really catch on faster, you need maybe the carbon credits or the biodiversity benefits and something on top that you feed into the EU CSRD program. So we see that, I see that as a huge benefit going forward. Mm-hmm. Again, it's been diminished a little bit and it's being cut and time froze and everything. So let's see if the timing holds, but still expecting a lot.
Yeah. When you talk with clients and companies, how aware are they of this and how ready are they?
I would say that if you look at our revenue last year, you could see that instead of growing 100% every year, it went down a bit because all the big companies, they can't stop. Why would they invest in nature projects the year before the year they have to to report on their minimum baseline so they could improve the year? I'm not saying that's what they did, but I'm saying that there's something there. There's a lot of big companies that know they have to do something in the coming years, and they're showing interest, and there is big banks out there that are trying to set the big step forward, and there's big financial institutions as well that are really forward in this process. And the few hundred ones that we talk to on like a yearly basis, they are all aware that there's a reporting thing coming, and they're just waiting on and moving on how to react to it and how to invest correctly into doing right.
Yeah. But I think biodiversity is also going to be a topic that's definitely going to increase in the coming years. We saw that specifically tree planting has maybe got a bit of a taboo at least in the media in the past couple of years, and I think the conversation is changing to more companies are more looking towards, okay, what is biodiversity? What impact are we having on biodiversity? And of course, the biodiversity crisis is a lot bigger than the climate crisis. They both feed on each other, but extinction of different species is escalating very, very quickly, and I think more people are becoming aware of that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Do you actually go to the nature meeting in Hirtshals I think it's like 2 weeks out?
We had it, a colleague and I, Kia, who's from Nordjylland, we actually have it in our calendar. But I think it
you'll go.
Is the same time as Børsen Bæredygtig cases.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which we were fortunate enough to be chosen as one of their 40 cases.
Wow.
So we get to present at their summit on 20th of May.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the date of the native meeting? Do you
Good
remember?
question.
I have a
We
look at my
should know.
calendar.
It's soon, at least.
Yeah, so it starts the 22nd.
Okay, so
Yeah.
then
We
we'll
should go.
probably
It's
be
interesting.
there.
Yeah, we'll be there. Cool. So we talked about how do you go about finding the right land, acquire the land? What's the process of doing that?
Find the cheapest? No, no, not at all. Actually, in Denmark, it's as I said in France. Again, when it's very difficult to get to source land, you bid on a lot of different projects, and when you get offered something, you can choose from that.
Okay.
In Denmark, it's different, right? You always find a farmer that's closing down. You can buy up something, and then the project might be too big, or you get a farm, or you get for 200 calves or something, animals.
Yeah.
You don't really need. So it's kind of selection where we try to buy off land, either separately or next to existing forests that we have.
Yeah.
Because it's much easier for the neighbor. That's what normally happens. The neighbor calls us and says, "Well, I can see what you're doing over here. I have the 6 hectares or 10 hectares or 20 hectares next to it.
Yeah.
Are you interested? And what's the price?"
Yeah.
And then you just go from there. It's always you always say it over the fence. Say, "Oh, okay. There's more land over here. You can buy that." Oh, okay.
That's also quite good. When you look at the biodiversity and to have them close to each other and not spread out too much.
Yeah, exactly. So and it's also fun to see because you get that first year, second year, like you get this like ladder of forests, and you can see the development as you walk past it. I think that's quite a fun way to see it.
Yeah. The process of acquiring, discussing with the farmer about the price, is that like a swift process, or is that like a back and forth for ages?
Well, if you say a high enough amount, he'll say yes quite fast. A lot of the land that they offer us is normally because it doesn't necessarily either make sense for them to have 10 hectares over here, which is far away from where probably they are, or it's of a very poor quality.
Yeah.
And that's also very important to highlight. For example, the one close to where we are sitting right now in Northern Jutland is an old gravel pit.
Yeah.
The soil is not very good, right? It needs a lot of work to make it happen. So the farmer was happy to get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's also the best, so you don't just move the problem somewhere else. That's what they often talk about with you. If you use the best agricultural land for forest, you just move the problem somewhere else.
Yeah, true. But sometimes, and I was talking to the farmer not too well in around I think Vejle or something, also in northern Jutland, and he had 200 hectares, but it was on top of drinking water resources. So he had a very, very good soil, high yielding and like over yielding, way over average every year. You could say, well, that's great, and like we should keep that. But at the same time, he uses pesticides and chemicals, and it goes down drinking water, and drinking water get drilled up, and you actually drink it right here.
Yeah.
So it's I see the issue, but there's a balance.
Yeah. How do you keep track of all the projects? I would assume there's a lot of things that you need to manage. Collecting biodiversity stats and just managing the projects. How do you do that?
So all the foresters spend a lot of time on the ground, and they collect data and they put it all into one gigantic
spreadsheet.
Spreadsheet that then gets
turned into commercial.
Turned into
2 pages, 10 pages.
Exactly. Yes.
Forest projects description.
Yeah, and then we do one annual report, or like one annual forestry report every year, where we do a sum up of every single project.
Okay.
So we gather all the data from all of the projects, and then we make it, or I make it pretty, so that it's readable, and it becomes this long, sometimes 60 pages report on all the actions that we've taken in each forest.
Yeah.
Both by country and then by specific forest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it also something that is publicly available? Or Okay, super.
Yep.
On the homepage, actually, everyone can.
Nice.
Yeah.
We actually read the manifesto before this meeting. That's quite nice.
Yeah. And I think that's also something that's slightly unique to publish your entire carbon methodology and manifesto to the public, so that everybody can read it. But I think it goes back to the core values of the company, is we want to be as transparent about our projects as possible.
It makes sense.
So the more data we have, the more we are going to share with with both the clients but also the public as well.
Yeah, I really like the part about it is not, you can't look at it, it's to just offset. You need to also do something, to reduce what you already.
Yeah, but companies, it's a fun way, because we had a lot of big companies initially a few years ago that came and said, we have this big problem. We have done enough. We haven't changed anything, but we want to buy a lot of carbon credits. Can you help us? And we can help you to a certain extent. First of all, we couldn't feed the total need, but the other thing was that's not very sustainable. We're not gonna get very far. So instead, we sold them maybe 10 or 20% of their needs, and it's like that's what we can do right now. And then you have to try to reduce and avoid as much as you can. And for the few ones that, let's say, a company in an office hotel that has very limited usage, maybe they have electric car, maybe they go green when they buy a vegetarian or something, like they've done a lot of different things, or buy used equipment or things like that. They still buy carbon credits to kind of at least sense that they're doing something right. And every year they write me back an email and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, this year is not. We don't need as many carbon credits." But it shouldn't be sorry.
No, they're doing good.
They're doing good. Because at the end, when they burn the first carbon credits, who's gonna pay the check? The CFO.
Yeah.
So next year he wants it to be lower than the first year.
Yeah.
And when he gets behind it, don't worry, it's gonna move the right way.
Yeah, that's right. I actually had that question about, also in your manifesto, you talk a lot about, you need to reduce, before you offset, right? So because I guess your business model also comes to, you need to buy credits, right? So how do you actually take that communication, talking to clients and public and...
Yeah. Obviously, we can't check what everybody writes online. I don't think anybody can. But we do provide communication support to our clients, providing them with a communication kit, depending on the type of offer that the way that they invest with us, whether it's biodiversity, trees, or carbon credits, for example. To get some kind of guideline on how do you communicate about it. And then we're always happy to read through anything that our clients wants to publish on how they work with us, specifically also because it falls back on us. So if a company writes something that's not correct on our partnership, then it also falls back on our branding. But in that sense, you can't check everything. I think as long as you dress the client appropriately with some material, and then are quite open on the fact that you have to be transparent. So if you have purchased and planted 120 trees in the forest in Newsom, then that's what you communicate. Be as factual as possible. And because if you start making big arm movements and saying we've made this grand investment, but when it comes down to it, then you've bought 120 trees, then it's not going to look good on you nor us.
Actually, we've throughout the years talked a lot with FSC Denmark. And I think, the branding part, protecting the branding is like, I think that there's probably the part of the organization where there's most people, right? Because it's so important, which I guess is the same here, right?
Yeah, except I'm one person.
Yeah. Maybe you should ask for a raise, right?
We should send them the podcast.
I'll cut it out for you. Then you can use it. Okay, so technology is us, of course, being a technology company. So we're really interested in technology. What kind of technology do you use, if any, in terms of operations?
So we do. We did try some things that didn't work, and we also have some things that do work. Let's take the ones that didn't work. For example, time-lapse cameras and things in the forest, which is quite fun to see our forest grow over time.
Yeah.
We did it in France. The problem was that they got stolen all the time. Then we tried remote censoring, insects and things and bugs and everything's in the air.
Yeah.
that didn't work because we bought up land in agricultural areas, so there was so much pesticides that there almost was no animals, so it's quite useless. And then it comes down to how do you present, like the technical version of what we do is more on how do we present it to the clients. So first thing is that, of course, we build like a digital platform where our clients can assess their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 trees. The carbon credits, the biodiversity projects. On that page, you can see everything from receipt, location, coordinates of your trees.
Nice.
Maybe you can even you can read the potential carbon uptake of your trees. You can read about the potential value increase of your trees.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite simple, but it has this kind of feeling that we're doing a lot to kind of show it. And of course, we did model. We spent a lot of time on modeling and building algorithms to kind of calculate the tree growth over time compared to fertility of the soil. To kind of build it in right on the platform to have at least close to true.
How do you actually do that across different countries? Because we also have models in terms of Denmark, but we also know we're trying to get into UK, which is a bit similar, but not quite. How do you sort of address that?
Well, Louise hasn't been here that long, so she's seen the process, but I've seen the process, and it's quite manual. At least in the beginning. So maybe you know the little red book here in Denmark that has the forest tables. The Bible. So actually, we used that and put it into to a database and some spreadsheets, and we build like the algorithm out from that. And then of course the foresters know way better than me. But then you look at the fertility and then the soil conditions, and the tree planted species, and then the projected growth over time, and that gives you the output. So quite manually. We also use the red book. So. It was quite hard to find
in
the beginning.
From 1930s. Yes, it is actually. When I bought it, I sent an email and the book arrived.
Same.
And then
that's so weird.
An invoice and I guess.
That is very manual.
Yes.
Yeah.
They don't press a lot of new ones.
No. Okay.
They should, because everyone's using it. So. Okay, so you also use, now I'll try to pronounce this in English, Bureau Veritas, right?
Bureau Veritas, yes.
Yeah. So how do you use that? Did they approved your
methodology?
Yes, so they have they've gone through our methodology and verified it, and they do audits every 5 years.
Okay.
Where they check that the calculations that we're doing are matching what they get, and then that way the projects that are Bureau Veritas certified are then audited.
Okay. Yeah. Is this like a standard scheme, or is this especially only for you?
So this one is only for us because we build our own methodology. Not build our own methodology. Well, we looked at the methodology that we like. There's the BCS or the Vera, which is primarily used in the global south.
Okay.
And in that specific one, the normal to generate carbon credits, the normal protection period is 30 years. And 30 years. Yeah. And we thought, well, that to us that doesn't sound like ecosystem restoration. So we went in and took basically the methodology, and we timed it by 3 to 3.5 times. So we got a minimum of 100 years. Yeah. It didn't affect the carbon very much, the amount of carbon, or not at all actually. But it kind of just, we had to make our own version because we're not going to guarantee only 30 years when we protect it for 100 or hundreds of years. Yeah. So we had to kind of build our own, and then we had to find on the market what agencies out there can actually certify these credits, because carbon credits on third-party verifies. And Bureau Veritas was one of the biggest one in the world. Yeah. And they looked at it and we got us on board, and we're pretty happy about at least the quality is amazing. Yeah.
Is it based on a sample size, or is it every forest that they go through?
They come and check every forest.
Every third year?
Every 5 year. 5 year? Every 5 year. Okay. Yeah. Wow. It's actually the same as Bureau Veritas, comes every 5 years as well.
Okay. How long does that take? I would assume that's quite time consuming.
To get the carbon modeling is quite easy. So based on our methodology, you can carbon modulate based on the little red book. Yeah. You know amount of trees, you know the soil, and you know the growth. And then you actually calculate the amount of carbon credits coming out of that project over time.
Yeah.
And then with the growth rates, you can actually calculate how many credits will come out of this. And then, of course, that's a presumption that we make. So we make the credits what's called ex ante or to be certified. And then the Bureau Veritas comes out in 5 years and say, that's great. Let's measure a little bit. And they do it quite manually, as I remember. And then they say, well, yes, we calculate the biomass. That is actually correct. The modeling that you did, we can certify that amount of CO2 that you modeled.
Yeah, so they go out in the woods, they do some samples, and then they verify that. Okay, nice,
interesting.
Yeah, and I assume then, of course, the scheme that's put on top of the forest, how you manage it, that will also be verified in that sense, because otherwise the mass won't be there.
The scheme, like the protection, is more legal framework. So, for example, a lot of companies. Why don't you do this in Africa and South America, and then they protect the forest over time? That's great. Well, the reason why we don't do it is because there's not a strong enough legal system to protect a lot of these areas. So, like even in Eastern Europe, I'm not going to mention country names, but we cannot necessarily protect the soil. It would make a lot of sense to buy some land there and plant some trees because price is right.
Yeah.
But if we cannot protect it and guarantee that we can protect it over 100 years, we're not going to jump into it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So that's actually besides the investment part, that's actually our real innovations that we spent years and a lot of money on fine-tuning the legal protection of it. That's really the biggest one. And we go into each country at least 6 months just to figure out how to protect the things, at least.
Yeah, in Denmark it's quite easy. I'm guessing you get the Danish
peace
word.
forest. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is quite easy, but it also depends. It has some restriction and something. So it also depends on what kind of forest you want to manage over time. But yes, that one's pretty easy. And if you had that solution, the rest of Europe, we would have much more nature.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
With the forest that you create, will they ever be like a PFC or FSC certified or?
Yeah, some of them already are.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so
both at the same time.
No,
okay.
No, not necessarily. So in France, you might have the FSC, but no one knows what it is. So they don't care. They want to see the PFC.
Okay.
And here in the Nordics, no one knows what the PFC is. They want the FSC. So it depends again on which country you go to.
Yeah.
On what certification you're going for.
It's branding.
Yeah. Well.
It is.
Okay, so so in terms of the 100 years guarantee, I actually came to think of what actually happens if you got, sold or went bankrupt, or what actually happens with the clients in terms of the investments.
Well, I think that's where the fredslov is actually quite.
But there's a few things in it.
Yeah.
A few ranges of protection. First of all, in Denmark, for example, you have that peace forest certification. That means that it's forest for hundreds of years, no matter what you do. In terms of your trees on your ground, it's in Denmark it would be more like a creditor system where you have creditors that owns part of a forest. In France, also in Denmark, where we have more like a protection fund that actually means that if something happens to us or you or anyone else, there's 40% of the money is actually locked into maintaining the forest over time. So that's actually so we make sure that no matter what happens over time, it will be protected.
Okay. Interesting. Water?
Yeah.
Sure. So have you ever met something like criticism in terms of your scheme? I bet you have, right?
Yeah.
Any good?
No,
anything
we have.
You want to share?
I think it's. Oh, I always say to people that are skeptical about the model or planting trees or buying carbon credits that you have to be skeptical.
Yeah.
And you have to have a critical point of view. You have to ask all the hard questions to make sure that it fits with your company or your personal values. And that the type of forestry that we do is what we call close to nature forestry. It's not everybody that's for that. Some people prefer production forestry. Some people prefer our model, and some people prefer untouched forest, where you plant trees and then you let it grow for the next 100 years and you just let it be, which is also, I guess, what nature will do on its own, natural regeneration. Where we come in is that we choose to try to add or speed up that process. So even though nature will regenerate on its own over the next 100, 200 years, we go in and do some actions that actually speed up that process. And you don't have to agree with that. No, that's fine. But I think you have to be critical of anything that you invest in, whether it's carbon credits or if you buy trees.
But it comes back to money. It comes back to who's going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this discussion with some Danish professors and things like it at different panel discussions. And it's I like untouched forest. I like the idea of untouched forest. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Who's going to pay for it?
Yeah.
Because we haven't found a model, and we spend a lot of time building these business models. We haven't found a model how to finance it.
Yeah.
So who's going to pay for it? And with our model, well, at least someone's going to pay to make a lot more nature in Europe. So that's a way forward. And then, well, donation has to cover, or states have to cover the untouched forest part.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, untouched forest. I mean, for a lot of reasons, it makes sense. But there's also the fact that we also want the timber to be out there and make use in applications and remove more.
Yeah, and I think is it a cubic meter
Square meter.
Of cement or beton?
Yeah.
If you switch that with wood instead, then you reduce it by 75%.
Yeah.
So if you in construction wise, if you switch over to using wood instead, then you're reducing your carbon emissions or your emissions.
Yeah.
But then you also get a beautiful forest where you can use it for recreational purposes.
Yes.
Which is something you most likely cannot do in an untouched forest. It's a bit more difficult, at least.
And if you
right.
get the FSC certification, you will get a little bit of untouched, 5%.
Yeah, 5%. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
In Denmark, at least.
So, throughout the years, what are the common sort of misunderstandings that you have met?
I think one of the main questions we get at the moment, specifically from a lot of nature enthusiasts, that's a difficult word to say in English, that are very skeptical of the type of tree species that we plant.
Mm-hmm.
We plant multiple tree species in one forest, obviously, to make it a close to nature approach. So we don't plant monoculture, but we do plant fir trees, and we plant species that are not originally Danish.
Okay.
Not the majority are.
Yeah.
And then in France, we are testing a few different species that are not native to that specific area. But as one of our foresters actually told me last week, he's saying I'm managing forests that a forester 100 years ago decided was a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm having these good ideas of what I can test in terms of tree species.
Yeah.
But the forester in 100 years is going to be dealing with the problems that I've made for him.
Yeah.
So you test different tree species, and they may not be native now, but maybe they'll be more resilient in 50 or 100 years.
Yeah.
Especially in France, where you have such a big country, and southern France, we literally have forests that we bought up or restored after they were burned by forest fires. And you're looking into tree species that can reduce the risk of forest fires. Then you start looking into all these things. In Denmark, I don't think we have that yet big problems with forest fires or anything else. No. Luckily.
Yeah, but we do have the invasion of the bark beetle in Germany, where the majority of the spruce trees are infested with bark beetles and are dying. And it's incredible driving through Germany and just seeing like gray pieces of wood sticking out of the ground, and there's no needles on the trees.
That's quite
and
scary.
So now we have to figure out what tree species do we then plant now, because obviously the spruce trees cannot survive there because of the bark beetle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine Douglas fir is probably one you're planting in your projects.
Yeah.
It makes also good sense. In France, Douglas fir is very popular.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing they can give you a lot of experience from there.
Yeah, Douglas fir a lot.
Yeah.
Here in the pine area, I think we use more Douglas and I think Norway spruce we tried.
Yeah.
Other pine, probably. I can't remember.
We've tried a small amount of Sitka spruce, I think.
Yeah.
All very high producing species.
Yeah.
Out of carbon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea is also then to mix. You have different main species, and then you have these spruce trees that grow really fast that then benefit the forest quite quickly, whereas oak trees grow. I think we have the oak tree with the highest cutting horizon is 199 years.
You can buy that online. Like
And
you can see, 109. Okay, it's ready in 199 years.
Wow, that's quite an investment.
A commitment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not even your grandchildren, but the generation after that that will get the benefit of that.
Yeah, it makes really good sense to mix species to if one species goes wrong in 30 years, and also the fast growing species will help the slower growing species you maybe want in the end. So yeah, makes very good sense.
Yeah. Okay, I actually only have one more question. Then I more or less got through my list. So what's on the wish list for the future? If you were to wish for something.
Well,
That's a very good question.
For me, it would be that the CSRD and the CSRD doesn't get postponed or cancelled, because it's a major driver to making more nature in Europe. Yeah. It's going to be a major billions of euros that's going to be driven right into nature projects all over the place, and it would feed directly here in Denmark. It would feed directly into the Green Deal and help convince even more farmers to plant forests faster. Yeah. And you would see the ripples in every country in Europe where you would just start seeing people investing like crazy in nature projects. Yeah. So that's a big wish for me.
Yeah, I think it'll be very exciting as well to see now that the Green Deal, Green Transition Deal, I'm not sure what they call it in English actually, but seeing that actually become physical projects that you can see and you can see in the data of the forest cover of Denmark that we're actually gonna grow in terms of forest cover, because we are embarrassingly behind the rest of the EU countries in terms of forest cover. I think are we at 15 at the moment?
Yeah, I think we just
barely.
15 actually, yeah.
Us in Bangladesh.
Yeah. Okay. Benjamin, any last questions?
I'm always I'm not too much into the carbon credit world, but I've always wanted to be able to have carbon credits on existing forest. Yeah. I don't know if that's discussed.
It exists.
Okay.
It does exist. So there's a big problem with that. And the problem is that there's probably not been enough credibility in the world to have such a scheme. So imagine that there's a lot of existing forests with a lot of biodiversity, isotopes, everything. And it's great. The woods have been there for hundreds of years. Has a lot of value, cultural value. The forest is like a lot of value. Then there's it's owned by some farmer in the South America somewhere, and this farmer will be. He heard that he can get carbon credits if he protects his trees, but only if there's an additionality to the project. And the additionality will be that he will say, well, I need to cut the trees to maintain my life, unless you pay me. Yeah. So he'll be standing and taking a selfie with an axe in front of a big tree and say, oh, it's going to go down if we don't do some carbon credits over here, and someone buys it. And then we go in, and it's called Red Plus projects, and then you go in and you buy these existing forests. For protection and preservation, it's great. And there's a lot of great projects, and there's a lot of trustworthy partners, and even in Denmark and even in Europe, like a lot of great projects and partners and in its global south. But the problem is you have these people in between that will try to use the system. And what's the real benefit for the world to protect something that's going to be there anyways? For a lot of projects. So it really there's a lot of due diligence on projects like that. And that therefore also the value of a carbon credit is much lower on the market. So you also have to kind of
to sort of monitor and maintain.
Yeah, well, it's easier to sell because it's cheap. But when you buy cheap, sometimes you also get you get journalists on your back that are gonna investigate what is this. I agree that the carbon accreditation system is not always perfect, and it would be great that you could do it on existing forests, because then you could really protect some forests around the world. Yeah. But until you find a way to make sure that people are not lying and are trustworthy partners all over the planet, even the poor, then for me it's hard to see that there's a huge benefit of doing these existing forest credits.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Good. Well, let's wrap it up, and thank you so much for joining this afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's always fun to talk about different forest issues.
Yeah. Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.